Welcome to The Real Game, a podcast by coaches for coaches. I am your host, Matt Philbrick. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of The Real Game. I am your host, Matt Philbrick. It's been a little bit of time since I've done a podcast episode, and it's not because I haven't been working on stuff. It's just been because this project that I'm going to talk to you about tonight has it's consumed a lot of time, not in a tedious way, but it's just taken a lot of time to put together. And so it's been about a month or so since I recorded the last episode that I had. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that one, it was with my brother Mark, and it was a great episode. So check it out. But tonight I am recording an episode that I have been working on for 4 or 5 weeks. It's a special episode. It has a lot of emotional meaning to me, and hopefully to other people that are going to be listening to it. Every once in a while, maybe even once in a lifetime, people come, or a person comes into your life that is just unique, and there's no one else like them. And maybe they have such an impact on your life that you never forget them. And, you know, people don't come and go like that often. But when they do, they definitely leave a lasting impact on your life. And tonight's episode is, I'm going to call it a legacy episode, because that's exactly what it's about. When I was growing up, I grew up in small town Maine and played basketball there. And my best friend, maybe you've heard me refer to my best friend Rusty off and on in different podcasts. His sister, Holly, married a guy named John Ashley, and John was a great guy, and I didn't really know it at the time. I remember the first time I met John, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. Rusty and I are going to talk about this in a few minutes. I have some clips of Rusty and I talking that I'm going to share. But the first time I met John was kind of at his bachelor party. I'll call it a bachelor party, but really, I think all we did was watch Fiddler on the Roof and drink Mountain Dew, and maybe ate Doritos and pizza. But that was my first exposure to John. But little did I know what kind of an impact that he would have on my life, and what kind of a guy that he was. And I certainly couldn't have told you back then that I would be recording this episode now. Yet here we are a lot of years later talking about this and talking about John. And he left such an impact on my life through coaching me, through just different interactions that we had, mentoring me, just being my friend, that I wanted to do an episode dedicated just to him. John passed away in the spring of 2020, and it was unexpected, and we miss him. But this episode isn't really about missing John, although we certainly do. We all miss him, but it's more about the kind of impact and legacy that he left behind. So I'm going to read you the definition of the word legacy from dictionary.com. And the definition is this: the long-lasting impact of particular events and actions that took place in the past or of a person's life. And that is what this episode is going to be about. So I'm not a journalist or anything like that. So I'm going to put this together the best that I can, in the hopes of honoring John and his life and the impact that he had on other people. And so I was able to kind of dig back into my past a little bit and into his past, and find some things out that I didn't know, and talk to some people along the way that had the privilege of being either coached by him or sitting under him as a youth pastor or coaching with him, and had some great conversations with several people. And the theme that just keeps coming back is John just John wanted to see people succeed. John wanted to see people follow after Christ and be their best for him. And so without getting into any too many more details, the first interview I'm going to play back is the one that I had with my friend Rusty. I think that kind of sets the stage a little bit for the following interviews. But before we do that, I was able to find an article that a guy named Kevin Edwards wrote in the Tri-County Independent paper, which I believe is up in Wayne County, Pennsylvania. And that's where John lived for quite a few years before he passed away. But this guy writes this article. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I am going to read at least the second half of the article to you. And it will kind of help if you're listening to this and you know John, then you know these things about him. It'll be good for you to hear. But if you didn't know him, this is the kind of person that John was. So it starts out with this. It says, "A good man. John Ashley had a positive impact on hundreds of boys and girls during his years at Canaan Christian Academy. He was a fiery competitor who worked tirelessly to establish and maintain a winning sports program. However, he was also a gentle, soft-spoken man with a seemingly endless supply of patience. John was the kind of coach who instinctively knew what to say to each player in every situation. He looked his kids in the eye when they conversed, never condescending or talking down to them. I wrote a little tribute piece for John a few months ago when he was inducted into the Wayne Area Sports Hall of Fame. It was a long overdue honor, and folks came out of the woodwork to sing his praises. Principal Michael Bull told me that John was a perfect fit for Canaan Christian. John has such a good heart, he said. He's given so much of himself to our school and to the athletics program. I'm so thankful to have worked with him these last 5 years. John is an excellent teacher and coach, and he's very passionate about helping kids." Canaan Christian pastor Daniel Henwood had also been eager to offer his praise. "John connects well with the students, and even more importantly, he said, John truly cares about them. He's one of the reasons that Canaan is a special place. On a personal note, I have known John Ashley for more than 20 years. Over the course of that time, we became good friends. I always looked forward to seeing him, talking with him, and watching his teams in action." And then he goes on to say, "John was one of those coaches who just got it. He never said an unkind word about his players, the opposition, or the officials. When his team won or lost, he was always right there to give a positive, upbeat interview afterward. I can say unequivocally that John Ashley was the kind of man I would have loved my own children and grandchildren to have as a teacher or coach. He embodied everything positive about education and athletics. Simply put, John was a genuinely good man whose heart was always in the right place. John and his wife Holly were married for 33 wicked, awesome, and fast years. All of us here at the Tri-County Independent send our deepest condolences to Holly and the Canaan Christian family. John will be sorely missed." So that was written by Kevin Edwards, I'm guessing in the spring of 2020, shortly after John passed away. And that kind of sets the stage for what kind of man that John was. So without saying too much more, I'm going to go ahead and segue into the conversation that I had with Rusty. And that'll be an enjoyable thing to listen to for the next few minutes. And then after each one of those, I'll maybe say a couple things, and I have 3 or 4 different interviews to play. All right, so today I'm here with my friend Rusty Bickford. Rusty and I go back to refresh my memory, Russ, probably 3rd grade for me, maybe 4th grade.
Yeah, I would say so, around then. Yeah,
probably around there. But basically, what I'm trying to say is Rusty and I have known each other forever. So we grew up together. We were the kind of friends where, if I wasn't at his house, he was probably at my house. Went to school together. We played basketball together. We got in a fair amount of trouble together I won't really get into too much of the details there. But my definitely hands down my best friend growing up, Rusty Bickford. So I'm just gonna tell you a little story about the first time Rusty and I got together. Um, so I think I was in like fourth grade, probably. I had just met Rusty, I don't know how many days before, but it wasn't long before that. And my parents were like, "Yeah, you should go over to Rusty's house," and so I did. They dropped me off there. For some reason, I think your parents were gone, so it was just Rusty and I. We were the only ones there. So I'm in the living room. We're watching TV, and Rusty's like, I got to go out to the other room for a second. So keep in mind, we're in like fourth and fifth grade, probably, or fourth and sixth grade, something like that. And all of a sudden, Rusty left the room, and all of a sudden, he comes running in, sprinting towards me with this knife in his hand, and starts stabbing me with a knife. And well, come to find out, it was a rubber knife, but it looked real, and it freaked me out. I'm sure I probably almost wet my pants. So that was my first kind of introduction to my friendship with Rusty. From there, it was all downhill.
Yeah, you totally lost your cool on that one.
I can't imagine that. I can't imagine that. I honestly don't remember what my reaction was, but I'm sure it was probably one of somebody thinking they were going to get murdered.
It was pure horror.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it was. And then just a couple of years ago, Rusty gave me this little rubber knife that was pretty much an exact replica of the one he tried to kill me with that day. So anyways, good time. So it's good to have you on here, Rusty. We're talking about John and the life of John and the legacy that he left behind. You and John were, pretty close friends, as I imagine, brother-in-laws. So just talk to us a little bit about how you came to know John and a little bit about your relationship with him.
Yeah. So my sister, John, married my sister, Holly, and she had brought him home from college in the early 80s, early to mid 80s. They went to Pensacola Christian College together, and they had met down there, and she brought him home to meet the family. Instantly loved him, really liked John. They were married in 86 and eventually taught school, where we went to school at Clinton Christian. They ended up moving on to Massachusetts, Maryland, Pennsylvania, coaching, teaching, but a lot of great memories with them over the years, great friendship. John and my sister would come home for holidays and summer vacation and we'd spend as much time with them as we could. Just playing games, exploring Maine, going to the lake, going to the coast.
Yep.
Just being at the ocean. Just a lot of great memories. My girls loved him. He was the fun one in the family.
Yep.
He just made everything more fun. He always paid attention to the kids and played with them. They'd wrestle, they'd punch him, and he'd make cool sound effects. So he was always a target.
Yep.
He used to take them swimming, and he would like throw them in the air, and they'd have a blast. And like all my kids I have 4 girls, and all the girls would be with him, and then the other kids at the lake would start migrating over. So he'd have a whole pile of kids around him and throwing them in the water, and just had a lot of good times with them.
Yeah, I think the first memory I have of John, I maybe had met him when he came to see Holly here and there, but the first real significant memory I have of him, I believe, was at his, we'll call it a bachelor party. That's not really what it was, but more of a get together before the wedding. And I think we watched Fiddler on the Roof, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah.
It's probably the most boring movie I've ever seen in my life to this day. But I just remember having a good time there with those guys. And I don't remember any of those other guys except for obviously you and John.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, in that little apartment there on that whatever that road was in Clinton there down from the graveyard we used to work at. So,
Right.
yeah. So, as you think of the life of John and your relationship with him, you have tons of memories and stuff, but what are some of the characteristics you admired most about him?
So he's just a great friend, easy person to be around. He just made you feel comfortable,
Hmm.
like you could be yourself. You didn't have to pretend to be anybody. Um, Great listener, really easy to talk to. You could just talk about simple, easy, light things, or you could just pour your heart out to him. Easy to talk to. You just felt like he had this genuine concern and interest in people. He wasn't like hung up on possessions or things, or he just seemed to be more about people and friendships and relationships.
Yeah.
That was a great thing about him. He was super humble. He didn't act like he was better than anybody. He was just down to earth. He's super talented. He's just really gifted in so many ways, but he came across as humble. He had a lot of success as a coach and a teacher. He was like every kid's favorite teacher.
Hmm.
He was just super humble. I think too, he was a great communicator.
Yeah.
He could just express thoughts about, his classes like history and talk about the Bible and life, and he just made things make more sense,
Sure.
make things meaningful in ways that would just impact your life.
Yeah. I remember thinking just recently about John as I was preparing to do this podcast and put things together. Had opportunities to talk to various people. Um, as and the whole podcast here obviously kind of revolves around him as a coach and him as a person. I don't think if I might be wrong about this, but I don't think that he necessarily had a lot of basketball playing experience, like maybe he did in high school or middle school. Pretty confident
Right.
he didn't play in college. But putting all that aside, he was a great coach. Like
Right.
just in
Right.
terms of even just understanding the game. Um, I know that wasn't his primary focus as a coach. Like he definitely used coaching as a platform to share himself and invest himself and ultimately to reflect the life of Christ. But he really was a good coach. I just remember as someone who did play a lot in high school and in college and then coached after that, just being amazed at his knowledge of the game. And he just taught how he taught himself all of that and was able to have really successful basketball teams wherever he went. And a lot of that was because of him.
Right. Oh, he loved it. He was always just thinking of his players, thinking of strategy, thinking
Mhm.
of the teams that he loved. Loved the game, loved his players.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a good segue to my next question. Now, John, in his most of his coaching years was when he wasn't at Clinton. I think the timeline is kind of Clinton and then Palmer, Massachusetts, and then I think Maryland somewhere. I'm not exactly sure, just outside of Baltimore, Maryland, maybe, and then Pennsylvania for quite a few years.
Right.
But when you had opportunity to watch him coach, what are some things that struck you or stood out to you, as just an observer?
Can I talk about observing him as he coached me?
Yeah, definitely.
Good. So,
I didn't know you could remember that far back.
yeah. So some things. So we together were his first team.
Yep.
So he was practicing on us.
We might have taught him everything he knew. Who knows?
Yeah, sure.
Never thought about it that way.
He just had a real love for us and a love for the game. Just had a lot of passion, enthusiasm that he just showed for us. It was, I don't know if this is weird or not. I feel like he was one of us, but he wasn't. Like he was an authority figure, but it was like one of the guys on the team at the same time.
Right.
I don't know if you felt that way or not.
Yep. Yep.
Almost like sometimes I felt like he was playing the game through his players. Like he would be in there if he could.
Yeah, right.
But it's like we were that avenue. I don't even know if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. Yeah.
But something like thinking of when he coached us, and it wasn't so much practices and games and things like we loved basketball so much, and we just wanted to play all the time. And we just had a limited season. Like, I think we were 10, 12 games, maybe.
Yeah.
Does that seem right?
No, it does seem right. And yeah, no, you're right. It wasn't a lot.
And when he started coaching, he knew we loved to play, and he would do everything to get us extra games. He'd schedule us scrimmages. He would try to get us into tournaments. He would host tournaments. I don't think our school ever had hosted a tournament before him.
Yeah.
And he organized that.
Wasn't it under him that we had some teams from Canada come down and play? Right. When he was there.
Yep.
Yep.
And I don't remember ever having any type of stats record before him. I just remember like a scorebook.
Yep.
But he started tracking rebounds and steals and assists and foul shot percentages. And he would just keep those things before you, and just being self-motivated, you see those stats and you want to improve where you could. And just by seeing, and that just made the game fun.
Yeah.
Just added so much to it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. Watching him coach, I don't want to make anyone upset, but basketball was his favorite.
Yep.
I know there's some soccer guys out there, but he just loved basketball. It was his favorite sport. I just remember through the years spending time with him, he was just always talking about his teams, his players, tournaments, games. He was just always talking about who he was coaching. He was even watching kids that weren't playing yet, that were younger, that he was looking forward to coaching.
Yep.
And he just loved it.
I can only remember it, and again, my memory's not the greatest, but I went full circle with him from being on his team to eventually having the privilege of coaching a game against him a few years ago. The way I remember it, and again, I could be completely wrong, but the way I remember it, I don't think there's going to be a lot of people on here that were there that are going to argue with my facts. So I'm going to present them as I remember them. But we were in a tournament with them, the school I'm at now and the school he was at last. And he and I ended up being in a game together, facing off against each other. And I remember just thinking clearly that my team was quite a bit better than his, but he coached in such a way that he kept his team in that game. and made it a very close game. I think we only beat them by 1 point when it was all said and done. And I just remember thinking, that's just what good coaches do. You know, you don't
Right.
always have the best players, maybe the best matchups as the other team, but you find a way to keep your guys in the game. And he did that night, and that just speaks highly of him as a coach. You know, those guys responded to him. They did what he asked them to do, and it was a great game.
I do remember that about him. Just adjusting who he had for players, for talent
Yep.
against other teams, and just adjusting the game to just enhance those things that would give him an advantage.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a neat memory. I remember that. Yeah.
So obviously, we would say, you know, John was taken from us too early. God's plan is sovereign. We're not here to debate that. How do you think John would want to be remembered?
I really think his love for God, his love for the Lord, his resolve and surrender to live for Him.
Mm-hmm.
I really could see that in his life. It was really important. I think it was everything to him. I think it was what mattered the most to him. Secondly, his love for his family and friends. He was all about people, and relationships, and just building people up and serving people. He was a servant, just always doing and helping, encouraging. I think, you know, those are the things that stand out most to me about his life.
Yep. I would agree with you 100%. Those were the things. Yeah, he loved coaching, but those were the things that really mattered to him. And I get that. That's a recurring theme that I get from everybody I talk to about him. So that's well put. It's a great point. Rusty, it's been good talking to you today. I appreciate the time. I know you're busy. You're a busy man. But I appreciate the time and the memories that you've brought up, and the things that you've been able to tell us about John and his life, and the things that we remember about him. It's a great walk down memory lane, and I hope you enjoy listening to this podcast when I get it all put together.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll see you.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that segment with my friend Rusty. Rusty has some great insight into John's life and what made John tick. It was great. It's great to talk to Rusty about that, and a good time talking about a lot of memories that we had as kids with John. The next person I had the privilege of talking to, her name is Tori Gillis, and I'm not going to say much about Tori. I think she tells a little bit about herself and her relationship with John, and how he impacted her life. So we'll get right into that segment. All right, so I'm here today with Tori Gillis, whose maiden name is Tori Grimm. So, Tori, when you were in school at Canaan, and you were there playing for John, your name was Tori Grimm. When did you first meet John? Like, how old were you when he came to the school? Did you, were you in elementary school? Did you kind of grow up at the school there? Or give us a little bit of background about yourself.
I transferred from a public school in the beginning of 6th grade.
Okay.
So met Mr. Ashley the summer before I started at Canaan because he was the soccer coach.
Okay.
So I was in 6th grade.
Excellent. So did you graduate from there?
Yes.
Very good. Very good. So what you mentioned playing soccer for John. Did you play any other sports for him, and how long did you play for him?
I only played soccer, but I played from 6th grade to 12th grade with him as my coach.
Okay. Did you have some pretty good teams there under him?
Yeah, my 10th grade year, we definitely had the best team that I had ever played on at Canaan. But we had some good years.
Excellent. So you're pretty young. I'm not going to ask your age because I have more manners than that. But when I was coaching in Frederick, Maryland, this would have been right in like 2003 or so. I actually went to Canaan for a weekend and played against your soccer team, your boys soccer team there. We didn't have a girls soccer team at the time, but that was, I think, the first time I saw your school and kind of saw John in action there, coaching the guys. At that time, he was coaching the guys team as well. So now just refresh my memory. John also coached girls basketball at Canaan, correct? And if I remember right, had like not just a season, but like multiple seasons in a row where they were undefeated.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So kind of getting into like John, specifically since this episode is about him, can you maybe just share a couple of good memories that stand out in your mind about John and about him as a person, or him and Holly? Just, when you think of them, what do you think about?
Yeah. So being a small Christian school, he wasn't just my coach, he was my teacher. So we have a lot of good memories in the classroom and on the soccer field. What I remember most about Mr. Ashley is just how supportive he was. He was huge in just cheering on each other and supporting each other. And we were always celebrating something for someone, whether them getting their driver's license or getting a car. He was just always looking for an excuse to celebrate other people. Our practices were tough, but they were fun. Lots of laughs and just good memories. He gave the best halftime speeches.
Okay.
You went out fired up and ready to go and ready to give 100% until the end.
Yeah, when I think about John and his coaching, at least from what I remember, and then from seeing him coach, sometimes from the sidelines as a fellow coach, fired up is a good word, a couple good words to describe him. And I just remember him being passionate about coaching and intense, but not in like a degrading, in your face sort of way, but just really for the love of the game and for the love of the students that he was coaching. So I think, would you agree with that synopsis?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. You always felt his love. That's why him and Mrs. Ashley do all that they have done. And yeah, you knew that he was passionate about the game. He wanted everyone to go out there and do their best. And you keep talking to you on the field. If he got quiet and crossed his arms, started shaking his head.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned that he loved to celebrate things, and that was probably, if I remember correctly, probably just a good excuse to open up a bottle of Mountain Dew somewhere along the way.
Mountain Dew, and an excuse to bring in Dunkin' Donuts for everyone.
There you go. Very good. Very good. What are a couple maybe lessons that you learned from John or the Ashleys that you maybe carry with you now, even today?
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I was asked to be the soccer coach at Canaan. So I am the girls varsity coach now. And when I was asked originally, I was really hesitant because Ashley's shoes are they're huge to fill. I was honored that they thought of me, but before I accepted, I wanted to think of just things that I wanted to aim to be like as a coach, like Mr. Ashley was to me. And the biggest thing that I came up with is that he just cheered you on and off the field. He was there to support you. You knew that he was praying for you. He wanted you to do your best and to be your best and to be all that God wanted you to be on and off the field. So as a coach now, that's huge to me, for my girls to know that I love them, that I support them, that they're prayed for during the season and not in season. And then one of the other things, I had him as a Bible teacher too. So I just learned so much from him in that area. And then he ended up being inducted into the Wayne County of him being the way that he was, and just modest about everything. He didn't want people to know that he was getting this award, but my parents found out, and another couple from Canaan. So my whole family and this other couple went and surprised him, and we were there that night. And I just remember he gave this really short, just a few minute speech, but instead of talking about all the years he's coached or any of the memories, he clearly presented the gospel And that night, it just clicked for me. Like, that's how you use the platform that God's given you. And it doesn't have to be a huge platform. His was Canaan and coaching, but he shared the gospel through it.
That's fantastic. And can you tell us again, just because you broke up just a little bit, what that award was that he received?
He was inducted into the Wayne County Sports Hall of Fame.
Okay, that's fantastic. And when you kind of first started talking, you said you were hesitant to step into that role because of the shoes that you had to fill. I can just imagine if he could tell you, he probably would say, there isn't anybody I would rather did this than you. I can just imagine John telling you that, and just being very proud of, you stepping into that role and knowing that you're likely more than capable, and he would probably tell you you're even more capable than he was.
Thank you.
Yep. So I appreciate you being on today. We've got several people that are going to be sharing a lot about him, but it sounds like you guys had a special relationship, and I know you obviously probably still see Holly frequently, correct?
Yes.
Very good. Very good. So make sure you say hi to Holly for us, and thank you for being on, and just thank you for sharing some of the special memories that you had with Coach John along the way.
Thank you. And thank you again for putting this together.
You're so welcome. So that was Tori Gillis from Canaan Christian Academy in Lake Ariel, Pennsylvania. She obviously had a special relationship with John and still does with Holly, and came up through the school there and is coaching now in a position that John had before. So what a special privilege, for her to be able to do that, to be able to fill his shoes there. And I'm sure she's doing a wonderful job there. So it was very, very good to talk with her and to just hear her share her heart about her memories about John. So the next interview I had is with a guy named Mark Gagnon. And this is going to go back pre-Canaan Christian Academy days to all the way back to Palmer, Massachusetts. And I'm going to say it was probably, and Mark might give specific dates, but I'm going to say it was probably in the 80s. And Mark and I had a good talk. I think Mark lives out in Arizona now, but I was able to track him down through some mutual friends. And this is what he had to say. All right. So I am here today with Mark. Mark, pronounce your last name for me just so I get it correctly.
Gagnon.
Gagnon. Okay. And Mark and I found Mark through some other people and mutual friends that I know. I think I ended up getting your number from Heath Anderson, is the one that ended up giving me your number. So I've been digging around trying to find some other people to talk to. And of course, everybody knows we're talking about John Ashley here. Mark, just give us a little bit of background about you and John and how you knew each other.
Sure. So John came to the small town that I lived in, I think it was 1989, summer of 1989. And he coached there through 1996, which directly coincided with my time from 6th grade to 12th grade, which, as you know, in small Christian schools is you can play sports from 6th grade to 12th grade.
That's right. And you play all of them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there was only two options. So you played soccer in the fall, you played basketball in the winter.
Yeah.
So he was our coach. He helped out with soccer the first year, and then he was the head coach of both for the last several years through my senior year of high school.
Okay. Excellent. And then was he the youth pastor there at that church at the time also, or?
Of course he was. Yeah. He was the chief cook and bottle washer. Truly, yep. He was the youth pastor. He was a Bible teacher, history teacher, English teacher, coach, you name it.
Yeah,
it had to be done and involved students. He was the one that got tapped for it.
Very good, very good. So if you can remember that far back, I know I'm not sure exactly how old you are, but I'm 51. My memory's getting a little foggy, but I can remember pretty far back. Share a couple memories of John that kind of come to your mind when you think about him.
Sure. From overall or just from coaching?
Just overall.
Yeah.
Overall. Any time you might have spent with him.
Sure. The man never met a stranger. He would treat you like you were old friends from the time he met you. He obviously was passionate about his faith and about sharing his faith. Mm-hmm. He was an outstanding mentor. But he also could treat even the youngest of whatever group he was mentoring as an equal. Even though there was always going to be like he was the leader and we were learning, he could get on anybody's level at any time.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably one of my favorite qualities about him. He could just welcome you in. And he and Hunter both would do it, but yeah, he would just kind of welcome you into the conversation and then try to figure out a way to get you on the team.
Yeah, yeah. Did you guys? I'm assuming you probably shared a love for New England sports with John. You know, John was passionate
Yes.
about the Red Sox and the Patriots, and I'm all of those things as well. And you guys probably shared some moments in that arena as well, I'm guessing.
No, we absolutely did. So the last time I saw John actually was in 2019. So I'm 45. I had just turned 40 a few months previous, and my now brother-in-law and I turned 40 the same year. He lives in Pennsylvania, as did John.
Yeah.
So we got in our head like, hey, let's go see the Celtics when they come to Philadelphia, and let's see if John's available. And by some miracle of the calendar, it was, because it was, I can't remember the exact dates, but I want to say it was in the middle of basketball season for them.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. So we're sitting there in our area, and I've got a Celtics hat on, and you know, it's pretty obvious we're Celtics going. We're being respectful, but it's still, you know, and so at halftime, you know, because they were cursing and all this stuff, and it was, you know, it was fun. Just sitting and watching the game, and the Celtics are ahead. At halftime, I start trying to make friends with some of the people around us. And
Yeah.
maybe they'll be nicer to us in the second half. Sit back down, and John pulls me close. He's like, "No, these people do not want to be our friends." It was great.
Yeah.
It's the only, yeah. I mean, yeah, he was in his element. He had a Patriots shirt on, but he had his coat zipped up all the way so
Yeah,
that you could see it.
Probably a good move.
Yeah. Probably
Yeah.
a good move. Yeah, maybe less. Maybe as I get a little older, I'll get that kind of expression, but I didn't have it then. So.
I gotta say that was a pretty bold move. I live just outside of Philadelphia, and of
Yeah.
course, you know, I don't mind wearing my Red Sox, Celtics, Pats gear where I live, but if I venture down into the city too much, like I did go to a Phillies game a few years back and wore a Red Sox t-shirt, and there were some guys there that heckled me pretty badly. So that was a pretty bold move on your guys' part to go into the heart of the lion there and support your team.
Yeah, no, it was fun. It was a great memory.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, John was definitely passionate about New England sports. So, do you do any coaching now, Mark?
I do. So I've been coaching youth soccer since 2005. Basically, my daughter's teams.
Yep.
We've kind of used it. Our daughters have a 7-year gap, so we've used soccer as another way to kind of build a community.
Yeah.
For them, a network of friends and stuff.
Mhm.
And so my oldest is now a freshman in college, but when she was in kindergarten, I started coaching her and coached her all the way through. Now I'm with my youngest, who's 12. But yeah, no, we have a massive complex 2 miles from our house.
Okay.
And so I've just been able to coach hundreds of kids over there. And it's really great. I love, similar to what John always was about, was teach the fundamentals. And kind of, if you teach the fundamentals, you can build the team.
Yeah.
And you can have success as a team. Although I will say, when I played for John, it can charitably be called a before picture of what ultimately ended up being a very successful career. We just had a very small school and a very unathletic group of kids. But no, I've been coaching. So I like to coach. I always try to put my kids up against older kids. So I've got a team of kind of 6th and 7th graders, and I'm playing in a division that goes up to 9th grade, and just kind of teach them about just the idea of like, okay, what's really a game? Like, we could play against kids our age and win those games, or we could not get better, or we could get better, maybe lose a couple games.
Yeah.
But really improve and really kind of the whole journey of success is just continuing to try it when you know the outcome is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
And that's what I love, and I definitely got that from John as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I did a whole episode on rec league and community sports, so that's another whole conversation probably, and the cutthroat nature of that. But no, that's good. And you mentioned what my next question actually was going to be. You know, did John's coaching or his influence on your life, does that influence how you coach now? And you definitely brought up a couple things, so that's great. And it's interesting to me how that has kind of carried on, and how all of us really probably carry on some element of a past coach in our life.
Absolutely.
We've all, if we've played sports, we've all had multiple coaches. I know I can think of one or two who just stand out to me and have definitely influenced how I coach now, even now,
Yeah.
years and years later. So,
Yep. Absolutely.
what do you think made John unique as either a coach or a person?
Honestly, they're kind of one and the same. I mean, he was just the three words that I have jotted down here are genuine, authentic, and loyal. Like he
Yeah.
did not have a false bone in his body.
Yeah.
And if he thought he was right, he was going to let you or the ref or anybody else know respectfully but forcefully.
Mhm.
But he believed it. He was never trying to get a call. He was never trying to get over on anybody. And in fact, like if he ever caught any of us flopping, we were out of the game.
Yeah.
There was nothing, and it wasn't a thing back when I played, right? But it's much more of a thing now. And,
Yeah.
I probably carried that with me almost as much as anything else. Like if you fall when you don't need to fall, you're coming out of the game. But no, it didn't matter if you were the best player on the team or the worst player on the team. And at different times in the ages, I was both.
Yeah.
He treated you the same. He expected you to come in and be respectful with him and be respectful with your team. But I mean, you will not ever meet anybody who was more genuine, authentic, and loyal than he was.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And genuine, just in terms of you never had to guess what he was thinking. Like,
Correct.
and he would have a way of telling you and yet be gracious at the same time, even if he disagreed with you. So,
Which is a missing art today. So.
yeah, it definitely is. Yeah. What are some things in terms of values or lessons that you think John placed above winning?
Integrity, character, fundamentals, kind of win in the boring, do the right things for the right reasons and you'll get results. But that doesn't always mean that you're going to have more points than the other team. Because sometimes you're just better than the other side, right? Sometimes you just have more talent and you can goof off and you can still come out ahead. But what did you really gain? What did you really win?
Yeah.
So he was all about do the right things for the right reasons. I don't know why, because he never really put it this way, but what's always kind of come to my mind is that, the picture of, the hitting of the rock, right? Taking and just beating on that rock. And it's not the thousand, it's not the single stroke, it's the thousand that came before it that ultimately breaks it through.
Yeah.
And that permeated through the way he coached 100%.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. That's great. You got some great insight there. So as we kind of wrap things up there, and I don't want to catch you by surprise with this question, but I'm assuming at some point his wife Holly will listen to this.
Sure.
Anything you want to say to Holly, either about John or just a shout out to her?
Sure. They were always together. They were. I had kind of written down some notes when we attended his funeral. And I wasn't sure if they were going to allow people to speak or not, but I actually still had them on the phone thanks to technology, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just they were really the dream team. Like they were all in on the mission. I am sure, without knowing specifically, but I am sure they could have made more money doing any number of other things.
Yeah,
and they would not have been 1/10 as happy.
Yeah.
What we always. Because my wife and my brother-in-law and my siblings and we all grew up under them. But I mean, they just poured their heart and soul out into all of us kids, probably hundreds, maybe even a couple thousand over the course of 30 years, and treated us all as though we were their kids. They were faithful, they were loyal, but you could not meet John without him beaming and telling you that. I mean, just 100%. That man was in love with his wife. He was in lockstep with his wife, and she made him better, and I think he made her better.
Yeah, definitely. Yep, definitely. Those are some kind words that I'm sure Holly will enjoy hearing. Well, it's been good talking to you, Mark. You haven't really, I don't mean this in a negative way, but you haven't really said anything that other people haven't said as well about John. Like he was just that kind of guy, and everybody kind
100%.
of reflects the same sentiments. So. I appreciate you added to that and for taking the time to be with me today and for being part of this podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
You as well.
I hope you enjoyed that segment with Mark Gagnon. Mark seems like a great guy. The few minutes that I had to spend with him, and certainly has some great memories of John and the time that he spent with John growing up and then later into his adult years. So thank you, Mark, for that interview. I really appreciate it. The next segment and the final segment that I have is with a gentleman named Nick Schweinsberg. And Nick is currently at Canaan Christian Academy in Lake Ariel, Pennsylvania. And I've had the privilege to get to know Nick a little bit through John, kind of over the last 10 years as we've coached against each other and watched our teams play together. Actually just ran into Nick at a tournament last weekend. So we got to catch up there a little bit before we did this segment. But I hope you enjoy this last segment with Nick. All right. So I'm here now with Nick Schweinsberg of is it correct that you're at Canaan Christian School in Lake Ariel, Pennsylvania, Nick?
Yep. Canaan Christian Academy.
All right.
I coach the varsity boys there. And then I'm also teacher of one of the Bible classes and the assistant pastor at the church.
Well, it sounds like you have your hands full there, so it keeps you out of trouble, probably.
Yeah.
So I've had the privilege of getting to know Nick in snippets here and there over the last few years. We've coached against each other in several games. We've sat on the sidelines and watched basketball together, some here and there. So, anyways, the reason we're talking, obviously, tonight, Nick, is we're talking about John, Coach John Ashley. And I know that you spent some time, obviously, probably quite a bit of significant time with John. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with him. Did you coach with him? Did you play for him? Like, what was that dynamic like?
All of the above.
Okay.
So when John and Holly, his wife, moved to our area, I was a part of Holly's first third grade class.
Wow.
And it's pretty cool because this upcoming year, my daughter next year is going to be in her class. So that's pretty awesome.
Unbelievable.
But so I got to know him a little bit there. And then he oversaw our elementary basketball program while I was playing in that. When I got up to JV, he was my JV coach. Varsity, he's my varsity basketball coach. I joined soccer a little later, and he was the coach there. And then once I graduated, I went to college locally, and he asked me if I'd be willing to coach with him in both soccer and basketball. And he was, in soccer, he was looking to grow the soccer program. And so me and another gentleman did some JV coaching, but I was his assistant in both. And we did that for about 5 years together. I was his assistant coach, and he allowed me to have far more input than I deserved at the time. And I got a lot of experience while I was in college coaching with him. And then after that 5 years or so, he actually switched to be the girls varsity coach, something I thought that he would never give up as a guys team. And he asked me to take his spot. And so I've been doing that for about the last 10 years or so. And so for me personally, I would consider John to have been one of my probably best friends and biggest mentors. And part of that was just because we spent so much time together.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because it's always sports season, one or the other. And we were doing that for about 15 years or so, probably, when it was all said and done.
What year, just out of curiosity, what year did you graduate from high school?
I graduated in 2008.
2008. Okay. I coached in Frederick, Maryland from 1998 to 2005. And I want to say around 2004, I took a trip up to Canaan Christian Academy and we played your soccer team. Yeah. And that was a lot of fun. John was coaching at the time. My guys thoroughly enjoyed being there, and it was awesome for me to be able to introduce them to John, as a friend and a former coach. So you might have been around there during that time.
Yeah,
so.
that would have been the right time.
Yep, interesting. I know you have a lot of these, so it's probably really impossible to narrow down. I say memories of John. Maybe just a couple humorous things, maybe that come to mind of memories that you have with John.
Yeah. So, well, since you and I are talking, one of the cool ones that sticks out to me was, I think it was probably the first time that you and I coached against each other was at the KCA tournament.
Mhm.
And he was so excited about, like, I think that's one of the most excited I've ever seen him before a game, particularly that he wasn't coaching.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, you beat us by 1 point.
I believe you're right. Yeah.
And he was just sitting there just beaming the
Yeah.
whole entire game. That was really cool. And like
two proteges duking it out there,
yeah,
right?
and the fact that it was like a 1 point game too,
Yeah.
I knew that he really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But for me, I think one of my best memories, like we could talk about wins, like for the rest, like we have so many cool stories for that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But for me, one of the best memories that I have with John comes from a loss. When I was in my sophomore year, I had just become a starter on the team halfway through the season, and we had a pretty decent team, and we came to our end of season tournament ranked pretty high. And on the opening night, we ended up getting upset by the team that ended up winning the tournament.
Okay.
But what was going on that season was my grandfather had been in hospice care for most of the season.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go from like practice or games back and forth from the hospital to there. And so it was like a really heavy emotional season for me. And after
Sure.
that loss, right, as a 16-year-old, like I had a hard time processing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hung out in the locker room pretty much like just crying for an hour, half an hour, 40 minutes. And he sat there the whole time.
Yeah. Didn't
say a word, sat next to me. I'm positive he was praying like the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
He eventually looks over and he's like, you're going to remember this and it's going to mean more to you than you know.
Yeah.
And it's going to be something that you build off of. But he waited, like just the fact that he didn't try to rush me.
Mm-hmm.
He let me work through the things I was working through, and knowing that he had been there the whole season to begin with, like he knew all this stuff was going on.
Right.
That was huge. And it really speaks to who he was too, right? Like that.
Yeah, definitely.
That he wasn't going to avoid the hard stuff. He was one of the first people that I told when I was switching to ministry major, and I knew that meant a ton to him. And that's kind of the relationship we had, like really, really like almost from my point of view, like a father-son type thing, where when something big happened, he was one of the first people that I wanted to know. So that's one of the big ones that stands out to me. And I think about it quite a bit.
Yeah. And that's just who John was. You know, he didn't talk a lot when he didn't need to.
Yeah.
And he knew, when to talk and what the right thing was to say. I just look at that as just being spirit led, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that was definitely John for sure. That's a great memory. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Does John's impact on your life influence how you coach now?
Yeah, definitely. I got to see it firsthand, right, as a player, and then coaching with him. But one of the things that he was so good, and I think the story I just shared kind of points that out, was that he always wanted to be more than just a coach.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to imitate Christ. He wanted to push us to do that. And so one of my goals is that obviously I want to do the best I can as a coach, but I want to show our guys that the Christian life is the best life you can live, and that there's so much meaning and fulfillment that comes from following Christ. And while I'm going to do it imperfectly, God still loves me and cares for me and walks with me, and that He's there, offering to do the same for them. And hopefully I can be a little part of their story. Like John was a big part of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully I can be that. And it goes beyond just being a coach. And that was something he was so good at.
Yeah, definitely. No, you're absolutely right. What do you think made John unique as a person and as a coach?
Well, when I was a teenager, early 20s, there were two guys that really like pushed me to pursue Christ, and it was because of their walk and their life.
Mm-hmm.
And in a graduation speech that he was the speaker at, I think he really summarized it pretty well. He was talking about how privileged he was to be at a place that allowed him to, what he said was, fight for the souls of the young people he worked with.
Mm-hmm.
And he 1000% did that in my life, because there were times where I was really butting against Christ, honestly, right?
Yeah.
And he was there to be like, what are you doing? Like, why is this the choice you're making?
Yeah.
Is it really what you want to be this many years later? And like actively fighting, I didn't realize it at the time, right? But actively fighting for my soul.
Mhm.
It's a privilege to be at a place where we're able to do that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
he summarized that so well in that speech, but then also lived it too.
Sure. Yeah, John was one of those. That last comment that you made, that John lived those things. He definitely lived what he preached. He practiced what he preached.
Yeah.
He was probably one of the most genuine people that I know. You know, and had the privilege of knowing. So, lastly, just to wrap things up here, we could probably talk all night, but what are some of the things that John placed above winning? Some of the values, some of the lessons that John placed above just winning. And I think you touched on a few of those things already.
Yeah.
But,
Well, we actually have there's a banner that hangs in our school and in our church, and it's in large part because of him. And all it says is 3 John 1:4, and it says, "I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth." And like that, I think, was one of his primary life verses, and a verse that he really took to heart. He didn't have kids of his own, and so for him, we were his kids.
Yeah.
And so, like, he poured into us. And your question, right? What did he place above winning? Like, he wanted to see, and I'm going to talk about me specifically, right? That he wanted to see me walk in Christ. And so we developed, particularly like my junior and senior year, this little like kind of code, because I had a tendency to lose my cool pretty quickly, unfortunately. And so we developed this little code where I like tap my chest like 2 times.
Yeah.
If I could feel it coming.
Yeah.
And no matter the situation, he'd bring me out, he'd talk it through with me.
Yeah.
And there are a few instances I can remember where like we lost a lead because I had to come out, had to regroup. But to him, like, my walk, my testimony was more important than winning that game. And if the other team had to go on a bit of a run because we had some real life stuff we had to work through, then that was what was going to be.
So
and
that
was huge for me personally, but also again, how I want to coach too, is to care for these young men before the result of the game. Right.
Yep. That priority above winning was certainly important to him. And I had the privilege of attending his memorial service there. If I'm not mistaken, it was in the gymnasium.
Yep.
And I remember seeing that banner on the wall.
Yep.
At that time. So, well, Nick, you've been great to do this. I know that it's, in some ways, maybe not easy things to talk about. Right. I totally get it. But certainly value your memories and the things that you learned from him along the way. And it's just a good reminder of what a great guy he was and what a good impact he had, I think, on both our lives. So thanks for doing this with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was an honor.
All right. Take care, Nick. So I think by now you could probably, if you didn't know John, if you did, you've been reminded, not so subtly about what kind of guy that John was. And if you didn't know John, if you're listening to this and you didn't know him, I think that this is just a great reminder of the impact that we as coaches have on young people's lives. Like I was reminded over and over again as I did this podcast that coaching it's an honor, it's a privilege, it's something that God has given me the opportunity to do, and I should never take lightly the kind of influence that I can have on the people around me. And what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind? Like, even as I speak, thinking of the years that I've coached, what kind of memories and legacy do I leave behind for those guys and girls? And as I coach hopefully in the years to come, what will my impact be on the people that I coach, the people that I have the privilege to coach? And certainly for John, it wasn't just coaching. It was his involvement in every area of young people's lives. And certainly the thing that he wanted most for them was that they would give their lives to Christ and give their lives for service to God. And it's wonderful to see how some of these young people have gone on to do just that. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave you with some audio of John speaking, and it's his induction speech into the Wayne County Sports Hall of Fame. And then I'm just going to end with that. And I think that's very fitting to hear John give his speech. It's maybe a couple minutes long, but there's nothing else that I could say that would top that. So as we finish the podcast off, here is John Ashley giving his induction speech into the Wayne County Hall of Fame.
My wife said yes when I asked her to marry me. But I do got to say that I saw Lauren DeLong's, like, oh my goodness. I'm glad I go first, but I say the greatest accomplishment I think she has is she gets to live in one of the greatest states around. And I'd be jealous of living in Maine, except I get to live here and I get to coach and teach the most wicked awesome group of athletes and kids around. I'm sorry you get second best because I get the best, and it's just amazing. So I thank you for this honor that is beyond my expectations. No words. But I gotta say before I sit down, because very few of you know me, I want to tell you that I brought 3 of my best friends with me tonight to this. And the first friend is my wife. My wife Holly. We've been married for 33 years and we've gone this crazy, awesome life. And one year she bought me a plaque we put up every fall that says, we interrupt this marriage for the basketball season. And I appreciate that. And the second friend that I bring with me everywhere. He's the friend that sticks closer to it than a brother. And without getting too Tim Tebow-ish or anything like that, I can't stand here without thanking God and Jesus Christ for the relationship He's offered me and allowed me to have. And I would love to tell you how He has led us every step of the way from there to here and taking this simple, sinful, foolish man and allowed me to have such awesome opportunities. However, out on the table, they still get brain stop. So there's a table, there's a little card that I would love for you just to take, and it talks about, are you winning the game of life? And it's out there for you to take to life. And the third friend that I brought with me are the memories of all the athletes that I've had the privilege to know and have grace my life and bless me and teach me life lessons that I don't have the time or the words to even begin to share with you. So again, they said we bring stuff, so on the table are all scrapbooks and pictures. Feel free to look at that just remind me of the impact all of these kids have had on me and why I do this all the time. And they say that you love what you do and you never work a day in your life. I haven't worked a day in 33 years, and I'm just so grateful to God for that. And I'm grateful for the kids for that, and they are just amazing. And I just hope that in some way God can use us to encourage them just a little bit in the way they have been a wicked awesome encouragement to us. So thank you, thank them, thank God, thank God.